There is no traffic, no coffee shop, no cell signal. The nearest grocery store is 3 hours away, and I am about to spend 7 days here alone. If you've ever wondered what it actually feels like to disappear from the modern world, not a digital detox weekend, not a camping trip with a backup plan, but truly, genuinely isolated, then stay right here, because this video is going to take you somewhere most people will never go. And if you're new, hit subscribe now, because this channel is where I go to places that make me feel small, and I come back and tell you everything. The town is called Supai. It sits at the bottom of a side canyon inside the Grand Canyon in Arizona. It is the only place in the continental United States where mail is still delivered by mule. There are no roads in, no roads out. You either hike 8 miles down a canyon trail, ride a horse, or take a helicopter that runs 3 days a week if the weather cooperates. About 200 people live there permanently. They are the Havasupai tribe, whose name literally translates to People of the Blue-Green Waters. I had been reading about this place for 2 years before I finally booked a permit, and even then, I had to wait 4 months for availability. I flew into Flagstaff on a Tuesday morning. The drive to the trailhead took about 2.5 hours, and for the last 40 minutes of it, there was nothing outside my window but red dust and silence, and skies so wide it felt aggressive. I parked my car at Wallapai Hilltop, which is essentially a parking lot on the edge of the world. There's no ranger station, no welcome center, just a sign, a cliff, and a trail that drops sharply down into the earth and disappears. I started hiking at 6 in the morning. The air was cold and smelled like minerals and something older than I have words for. The first 2 miles are the hardest because you're descending steep switchbacks with a full pack, watching the world above you close off like a door slowly shutting. I kept stopping to look back up at the rim. Each time I did, the parking lot looked smaller. The cars looked smaller. And then eventually there was nothing up there to see at all. Just rock walls on both sides, narrowing as I went deeper. And ahead of me, a trail that felt like it was leading somewhere that hadn't fully decided to exist yet. By mile 4, the canyon had changed. The walls turned from rust red to a pale cream color, almost white in the morning light, and the trail leveled out into a wide sandy wash. I started seeing cottonwood trees. Then I heard water, just a trickle at first, barely audible, and then it got louder, and I came around a bend and there was Havasu Creek running bright turquoise through the canyon floor, and I actually stopped walking. I just stood there for a minute, because no photograph has ever done that color justice. It is caused by the high concentration of calcium carbonate in the water, which gives it a milky, almost tropical blue-green that looks completely wrong for a desert. It looks like something someone painted, and it is cold and fast, and it runs all the way through the village and beyond. I reached the village of Supai around 9:30 in the morning. It is, by any measure, a small place. A few dozen homes, a school, a church, a small cafe that serves fry bread and Navajo tacos, a tiny post office that is famous for being the most remote in the country, and a general store where everything costs 3 times what it would in a city because everything has to come in by mule. I checked into my campsite, which was another 2 miles past the village, downstream toward the falls. You carry your own gear. You set up your own tent. There is no resort, no glamping, no room service. There is just the creek, the canyon walls, the sound of water, and the sky above, which is a long, narrow strip of blue between 2 walls of stone. The first night, I did not sleep well, not because I was uncomfortable, but because the silence was so complete it almost had a sound of its own. I live in a city. I am used to ambient noise, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional siren, the refrigerator, the neighbor's television through thin walls. Out there, when the wind stopped, it was the quietest place I had ever been in my life. I lay in my tent listening to nothing, and it took me hours to stop waiting for something to break it. By day 2, I had stopped checking my phone. There was no signal to check, obviously, but even the habit of reaching for it, that automatic reflex, started to fade. I spent most of the morning sitting by the creek, watching the water move. That's it, just watching water. And I want to be careful here because I know how that sounds, like something you'd read on a wellness blog. But there is something that happens to your brain when you remove every option for stimulation and you sit with one thing for long enough. The thoughts that had been waiting in line finally got their turn. Things I had been too busy to think about for months came forward on their own. On day 3, I hiked to Havasu Falls, which is the waterfall most people come to see and photograph. It is, genuinely, one of the most beautiful things I have witnessed in person. The water drops about 90 feet into a wide pool that is the color of a swimming pool from a dream, and the mist from it touches your face from 50 yards away, and the sound is enormous. There were other visitors there, maybe a dozen, and for the first time in 3 days, I heard voices that weren't mine. We nodded at each other the way people do when they all know they are somewhere special, and no one wants to break it by speaking too much. I hiked further to Mooney Falls that afternoon. This one requires descending chains and iron stakes bolted directly into the cliff face, essentially a hand-over-hand climb down a slick rock wall with a 190-foot waterfall roaring next to you. I will tell you honestly that I was scared. My hands were shaking on the chains. The rock was wet and the mist made it hard to see, and at one point I was pressed flat against the canyon wall trying to convince myself that my footing was solid. But I made it down, and the pool at the bottom of Mooney was completely empty, just me and the water and the sound, and I swam in it for 20 minutes, and it was one of the best 20 minutes of my adult life. Day 4 brought rain. It came without warning in the early afternoon, the sky going dark fast, and within minutes the canyon walls were streaming with water, and the creek had gone from turquoise to brown as sediment rushed in from the side channels. I sat under a rock overhang watching it, and felt for the first time in a long time, genuinely at the mercy of something. Not inconvenienced, not annoyed, at the mercy of it. There is a difference, and the isolation made it clear. In a city, rain is an interruption. Out there, rain is the whole conversation. I talked to a few of the Havasupai residents over the course of the week, not at length because this is their home and I am a visitor, and I was mindful of that. But a man named Raymond, who ran the small cafe, told me that the biggest change he had seen in his lifetime was not the internet or electricity or outside food coming in by mule. It was the attitude of the tourists. He said, and I am paraphrasing, that people used to come down here and get quiet. Now they come down and they are still loud, just in a different canyon. He wasn't bitter about it, just observational. He said the falls don't care either way. I thought about that for most of day 5. Day 5 and 6 blurred together in the way that time does when there is no screen telling you what hour it is. I woke up when light came into the canyon, which at the bottom of a side gorge happens later than you'd expect. I ate simple food, I read, I walked, I sat, I swam. I watched a hawk ride thermals for almost an hour without flapping its wings once. I wrote more in my journal those 2 days than I had written in the entire previous year. Not because I am a journaling person, but because thoughts that have nowhere else to go eventually find the page. On the morning of day 7, I packed up my camp before sunrise and started the 8-mile hike out. Going up is harder than going down. The switchbacks at the end, the ones that bring you back up to the rim, are brutal with a loaded pack, and the sun was fully up by the time I was climbing them. But when I came over the lip of the canyon and stepped back onto the flat parking lot and felt asphalt under my feet again, something was different. I stood next to my car and I didn't get in for about 10 minutes. I just looked back at the edge where the trail disappeared down into the earth, at that narrow slot in the rock that led to something so completely separate from everything I lived in every day. My phone connected to Signal before I even started the engine. 47 notifications, 3 voicemails, a news cycle that had continued entirely without my input. I read none of it for another hour. I drove back toward Flagstaff and I kept the radio off. And I thought about Raymond's comment, about people coming in loud and leaving loud, just in a different canyon. And I thought, I don't want that to be me. I don't have a tidy conclusion for you. I didn't come back transformed in some cinematic way. I didn't quit my job or move off the grid or find God in a waterfall, though I understand why people say things like that. What I came back with was simpler and harder to explain. A recalibrated sense of what noise is and what silence costs, and how rarely we choose to pay it, and a very clear memory of turquoise water moving fast through red rock in a place that has been there for 10,000 years and will be there long after every notification I ignored has been forgotten. If this video made you feel something, subscribe. I go to the places that are hard to get to, and I try to tell the truth about what it's like when I get there. I'll see you in the next one.